Sylvester Stallone stood in the first-class line, dressed simply, a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. His unassuming attire, a well-worn black jacket paired with faded jeans and scuffed sneakers, belied the intensity of his presence. Every detail about him, from the tired but warm eyes to the subtle creases on his face that spoke of a life filled with both struggle and triumph, exuded an inner strength that demanded respect without needing to shout for it. A man nearby watched him with disdain, his eyes narrowing as he took in Stallone's modest appearance, unable to hide the arrogance that pulsed from every pore. What unfolded over the course of the flight would leave everyone aboard utterly speechless and, for one man, would mark the beginning of a transformative journey. The Los Angeles airport pulsed with life that day. The Grand Terminal was a tapestry of vibrant conversations, rolling suitcases, and the distant hum of announcements echoing through its high, gleaming ceilings. Amidst this orchestrated chaos, Sylvester Stallone waited calmly in the first-class line. His attire was the antithesis of extravagance. A simple black jacket that had seen better days, paired with faded jeans that whispered of countless adventures, and sneakers that had clearly journeyed far. Draped casually over his shoulder was a small, well-traveled duffel bag, a silent testament to a life spent both in the limelight and behind the scenes. Stallone's demeanor was a study in contrast to the frantic energy surrounding him. While other passengers hurried by, their faces etched with impatience and stress, he exuded an air of tranquility. He observed the ebb and flow of the crowd with quiet interest, as if each fleeting moment was a lesson in the art of being present. To the casual observer, he might have seemed like just another traveler. Yet a closer look would reveal the steady confidence of a man who had weathered many storms and emerged stronger each time. Behind him in line stood Victor Harding, a man whose entire appearance screamed of carefully constructed importance. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that hugged his angular frame, with shoes polished to a blinding shine and a cologne that left a lingering, ostentatious trail, Victor embodied the very definition of luxury and entitlement. Every deliberate movement and every rehearsed smile seemed designed to broadcast his superiority. When Victor's eyes landed on Stallone's humble figure, he couldn't help but let a condescending remark slip out. "First class, huh?" Victor drawled with a thin, ironic smile. "You never know who you'll find here these days." Stallone slowly turned his head, his gaze steady and calm. "Yeah, the world is full of surprises," he replied, his tone measured and devoid of any hint of irritation. Victor frowned, his features momentarily tightening in disbelief that such a subdued response could be deemed acceptable. Expecting a reaction that would confirm his prejudices, he pressed on. "Nothing personal," Victor continued, leaning in as if to share a secret. "But you don't strike me as the kind who flies in first class. It's rare to see someone so casual up here." Just then, the boarding call resonated through the terminal. The first-class line began to shuffle forward, and both Stallone and Victor moved in tandem, their contrasting attitudes now set against the backdrop of pristine airline service. Victor strode confidently, his every step resonating with the assuredness of someone used to commanding attention. In contrast, Stallone maintained a gentle pace, his presence quiet yet undeniably magnetic. Once aboard the luxurious aircraft, an unexpected twist unfolded. Upon reaching his designated seat, Victor glanced down at his boarding pass, then looked up, and there, unmistakably, was Sylvester Stallone settling into the seat directly beside him. "You've got to be kidding me," Victor muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. He eased into his plush seat with a forced chuckle, his voice laced with a mix of irritation and incredulity. "Of all the seats in first class, it had to be right here." Stallone, with deliberate calm, placed his duffel bag under the seat and offered a polite nod. "Looks like we'll be traveling together," he said, his tone friendly and unassuming. Victor's posture stiffened as he crossed his arms, his mind racing with thoughts of indignation. It wasn't simply that Stallone was sitting beside him. It was that this unpretentious man had so effortlessly claimed a space Victor believed was reserved for the elite. As the other passengers settled into their seats, the tension between the two men began to simmer. Determined to reassert his dominance, Victor leaned toward Stallone, his voice laced with casual condescension. "So, what do you do for a living?" he asked, already convinced that the answer would only serve to validate his own assumptions. Stallone paused for a moment, adjusting the strap of his bag before answering. "I work in film." Victor's eyebrows shot up in feigned surprise. "Oh, I see. Commercials, small-time stuff?" he ventured with a dismissive chuckle. Stallone allowed himself a slight, knowing smile. "Something like that," he replied, his tone light but firm. Victor laughed, a sound that failed to hide the underlying scorn. "I've always found it fascinating how people try to find their place. But let's be honest, first class isn't really for everyone. Sometimes you're just lucky to be here." Stallone regarded him quietly for a few moments, then said, "I think we all end up exactly where we need to be, one way or another." Victor scoffed at this, dismissing the comment with a wave of his hand. "Sure, that's one way to look at it. But real life isn't so simple, is it?" Stallone simply turned his attention back to the window, allowing the silence to settle like a heavy fog. Yet Victor wasn't finished. Leaning forward with an air of superiority, he continued, "You might be sitting here, but there are things money just can't buy. Some places simply don't belong to certain people." In response, Stallone's eyes met Victor's, his expression calm yet penetrating. A look that spoke of experiences too vast to be summarized by mere words. Victor, convinced he'd struck a nerve, managed a self-satisfied smile, believing he had the upper hand. Little did he know, the true test of character had only just begun. As the aircraft soared into the skies, the in-flight service commenced. A flight attendant glided gracefully down the aisle, offering drinks with a practiced smile. Victor seized the moment to further assert his air of entitlement. "A glass of champagne, please," he said, his voice confident and deliberately loud enough to catch the attention of those nearby. "Something that matches the exclusivity of this seat." The attendant nodded politely, accustomed to the demands of first-class passengers. When her attention turned to Stallone, he requested simply, "Just water, please." Victor's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "Water?" he scoffed, a wry laugh escaping him. "You're really going to waste a first-class experience on water?" Stallone accepted the bottle with a steady hand and replied, "I'm fine with this. Sometimes, simplicity is enough." Victor's voice dripped with derision. "I guess that works for people who settle for less. Not everyone is born to enjoy the best life has to offer." Stallone merely raised his water bottle, took a measured sip, and allowed the comment to pass without further comment. Nearby passengers exchanged glances, some filled with silent admiration for Stallone's restraint, others with growing disapproval toward Victor's pretentious banter. "Maybe the best is different for everyone," Stallone finally said, his tone as calm and measured as the steady beat of a metronome. Victor dismissed the sentiment with a bitter chuckle. "That's easy for you to say. Some people need to show off to be noticed. The world's competitive. If you don't flaunt your achievements, people just overlook you." Stallone leaned back in his seat and replied, "Maybe true success doesn't need to be shouted from the rooftops. It speaks for itself." The cabin's atmosphere shifted noticeably as those nearby began to pay closer attention. The once overbearing arrogance of Victor was now met with a growing sense of disapproval from the other passengers. Victor, feeling his control slip away, tried to push further. "People who talk about what they have often do so to hide what they lack. Isn't that right?" Stallone's gaze turned to Victor, steady and unyielding. "I've noticed that sometimes the loudest boast comes from the emptiest places," he said softly, yet his words carried a weight that resonated through the hushed cabin. Caught off guard, Victor's confident facade began to crumble. He opened his mouth, but words failed him. His mind raced, each passing second deepening his discomfort. As the murmurs of the surrounding passengers grew louder, their eyes fixed on him with a mix of curiosity and disapproval. As the flight progressed, the tension between the two men wove itself into the very fabric of the journey. Victor, desperate to regain his composure, tried once more to dominate the conversation. When the flight attendant returned to clear away empty glasses, he leaned forward again, his tone more biting. "You know, life is like flying first class," he said, gesturing with his champagne glass as if it were a scepter of superiority. You work hard, earn your spot, and then you enjoy the ride. But some of us are only here because of sheer luck. Stallone, placing his water bottle carefully on the tray table, turned to Victor with a piercing calmness. Whether it's luck or hard work, in the end, we all land in the same place, he said, his words lingering like a challenge in the air. A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Passengers exchanged knowing glances. A few leaned in closer, eager to catch every word of this unfolding drama. Victor, however, refused to be silenced. Not everyone's journey is the same, he snapped. Some of us are on a higher level, people who truly understand what it means to be here. Stallone leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto Victor's with an intensity that belied his calm exterior. The value of being here isn't measured by what you own or flaunt, he said, gesturing subtly toward the elegant surroundings of the first-class cabin. It's about how you treat others and the respect you show. Success, in its truest form, doesn't need to be advertised. Victor's laughter was sharp and mocking. Self-help philosophy in first class? That's rich. Maybe you should start giving motivational speeches instead of acting like you've got all the answers. Stallone's smile remained gentle, but his eyes were unmistakably firm. Without another word, he turned his attention back to the window, leaving Victor fuming and the other passengers silently applauding his restraint. As the minutes ticked by, Victor's facade began to crack further. His earlier bravado now seemed forced, and the onlookers' whispers grew louder. Determined to salvage his pride, Victor made one final attempt to provoke. "You know what's funny?" he began, voice trembling slightly as he gestured with his champagne glass. "People who have nothing to show for themselves are the ones who endlessly talk about humility and simplicity." Stallone's response was immediate and quiet, yet it carried a profound truth. "I've noticed that those who need to shout about their achievements are often trying to mask something deeper. Fear, insecurity, loneliness," he said softly, his words cutting through the tension like a scalpel. The statement struck Victor like a blow. His face flushed a deep red, and for a moment he was rendered speechless, his mind racing as he struggled to muster a retort. Unable to contain his mounting frustration, Victor abruptly stood up, his movement jarring enough to send his empty champagne flute crashing to the floor with a resonant clink that silenced the cabin entirely. "You think you're better than me?" he bellowed, his voice echoing in the now silent space. "Sitting there with your clever little phrases, acting like you've got all the answers, when you don't know a damn thing about the real world." Every eye in first class was now fixed on him. The flight attendant hastily approached, her voice soft and conciliatory as she attempted to diffuse the situation. Yet, despite the growing commotion, Stallone remained seated, his gaze unwavering as he absorbed every word. "I don't think I'm better than you," Stallone said in a tone that was both firm and gentle. "I just believe that sometimes we need to pause and consider what really matters. And Victor, you don't have to prove anything to anyone." The sincerity of Stallone's words rippled through the cabin, and even Victor's harsh words faltered in the wake of such unadorned truth. His breathing was heavy, and he seemed on the verge of breaking under the weight of his own shame. Slowly, he sank back into his seat, eyes lowered in silent defeat as the murmurs of disapproval from the other passengers grew louder. For what felt like an eternity, neither man spoke. The tension that had built between them now seemed to echo in every corner of the cabin. Victor's gaze fell to his hands as if they held the key to all his missteps, replaying each moment of arrogance in his mind. Meanwhile, Stallone resumed reading a small paperback, his demeanor as composed as if the entire episode were nothing more than a brief interlude in an otherwise ordinary day. Then, as if to punctuate the dramatic arc of the encounter, the flight attendant returned once more with a polite smile. "Mr. Stallone," she said in a tone that resonated with quiet admiration, "the captain asked me to inform you that your connection in Tokyo is confirmed. He also sends his best regards." The mere mention of Mr. Stallone rippled through the first-class cabin like a sudden gust of wind. Eyes widened, and whispers of recognition passed among the passengers who had until then only observed the subtle drama unfolding before them. Victor froze, his earlier bluster now replaced by a dawning realization. "Stallone," he murmured, a mix of disbelief and humiliation lacing his voice. Stallone offered a polite nod in acknowledgement, thanking the attendant without missing a beat. He turned to Victor, who now sat staring at him as if he were witnessing a ghost from his past. "Everything all right, Victor?" Stallone asked softly, genuine concern threading through his calm tone. Victor's face, once brimming with unyielding arrogance, now betrayed a deep vulnerability. I had no idea. You never said who you were," he finally managed, his voice low and apologetic. "If I'd known." Stallone's eyes softened ever so slightly. "I didn't think it was necessary. I don't usually use my name as a calling card for respect." Victor's eyes dropped in shame. "I didn't mean. I just didn't realize." His words trailed off as he struggled to reconcile his own assumptions with the undeniable truth before him. Taking a deep breath, Stallone leaned forward once more. "It doesn't matter who I am," he said quietly. "What matters is how we treat each other. The truth isn't defined by a name or a title. It's revealed in our actions and in the respect we show to others." The impact of Stallone's words was palpable. Victor sat in heavy silence, the earlier bravado evaporating in the face of such genuine humility. Around them, the passengers' approving glances and murmurs of empathy served as a gentle rebuke to Victor's earlier arrogance. As the plane began its descent, the atmosphere in first class had shifted irreversibly. Victor's inner turmoil was evident, his earlier confidence replaced by a dawning understanding of the importance of humility and respect. Gathering his courage, he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to apologize not just because of who you are, but because I acted arrogantly. I was an idiot." Stallone regarded him with a steady kindness. "I appreciate your apology," he said softly. "But more than that, I hope you learned something from this experience." Victor nodded slowly, the weight of his missteps settling over him like a heavy cloak. "I will," he murmured, his voice laced with genuine regret. Stallone's gaze held a quiet sincerity as he offered a final piece of wisdom. "Often, what we chase externally is nothing more than a reflection of what we lack inside. True success isn't about what you can flaunt. It's about the positive impact you have on those around you." Remember that, Victor. When the aircraft finally touched down, the tension of the journey lingered in the air as both men disembarked. In the bustling terminal, Victor lingered for a moment, watching as Stallone moved gracefully through the crowd. Fans and well-wishers approached Stallone discreetly, each receiving a warm smile and a few kind words, his demeanor humble despite the unmistakable aura of celebrity. Victor's eyes fell to his own hands, now stained with the residue of his own arrogance. In that reflective moment, he understood that the true measure of a person isn't in the wealth or status they accumulate, but in the kindness they extend to others. Sylvester Stallone's parting words echoed in his mind, a timeless reminder. We're not defined by what we accumulate, but by how we treat others. In the end, every choice we make shapes who we become. Are we driven by the desire to impress others, or by the aspiration to be better people? Stallone's calm wisdom delivered a clear message. Real success isn't measured by what we achieve or display, but by the positive influence we have on the world and the lives we touch. So the next time you find yourself tempted to judge or belittle, remember, respect and humility never go out of style. Perhaps the change you wish to see in the world begins with a single act of kindness, and with the courage to look inward before reaching outward. If you enjoyed this story, click on the screen to explore more tales of hope, compassion, and resilience. There are countless stories waiting to warm your heart and inspire your soul.